Hello, welcome to our latest session discussing topics of interest for those people that use wire rope. I'm joined today by Alistair Challoner.
Thank you, Pete. Good to be here.
Hi Al, to discuss wire rope storage and why it's important. Al here has worked in the lifting industry for 30 plus years and is based out of our head office in Doncaster. Al's particular specialism is the oil and gas industry, and you can see him here on a platform with a fairly significant rope behind him. Anyway, we'll cut to the chase. The first question, and the important question here is, for Al, why is rope storage important?
Well, thanks, Pete. I think it's worth remembering that rope storage is important, first and foremost, is because of the value of the product. Even smaller ropes for use can have a significant multi-thousand-pound value. When you get up to the top end of the oil and gas industry ropes, you're talking close to £1 million either side, and that in itself lends you to realise that you have to look after these ropes correctly and store them where possible correctly. You know, it's not just the value of the product, it's the downtime on these offshore assets that is the real damaging factor to the end user. So first and foremost, that's why you need to look after these ropes that are expensive.
So essentially, in promoting rope life, you're getting the maximum value out of your asset.
Yes, I would say so, yeah.
I mean, when we move to this picture here, you can see this one doesn't look in the greatest of shape. Can you tell me what's sort of wrong with what's here?
I actually took this photo myself several years back in China, and these ropes had been reported as having surface staining. We made the trip to see the ropes. They were, first and foremost, they were ungalvanized, which often ropes are. Drill lines are more often than not ungalvanized, so by nature they've got a challenge at the beginning against the onset of corrosion. So, you know, first of all, customer was obviously concerned, but it's worth considering that, and this is why good storage and wrapping of the ropes when it leaves the factory and beyond. These ropes are often at sea, cease transportation 4 to 6 weeks to all parts of the world, and by nature of transport, they're often on the deck or close to the deck in storage, exposed to the elements in a marine environment.
And so, corrosive salt.
Yeah, you know, that could well be just surface staining that can be removed relatively easily and lubricated over. But, you know, if it's had a further exposure, that could lead to pitting of the rope, whether there would be a question of whether it's fit for purpose even at this stage of arrival. So that was the story here, and that's why.
But the best case scenario is reduced rope life, essentially.
Worst case, yeah. That could be potentially, and the doubt in the end user's mind is a big factor.
Okay. So we've talked about problems with storage. What's sort of ideal from a storage point of view?
Ideal, and you know, acknowledging that this is a Bryden facility, so you would expect us to have good storage facilities, is indoor, away from the elements where possible, direct sunlight, and keeping temperature at 50 degrees centigrade and below is an ultimate aim, but you don't want those fluctuations in temperature. So that's what the ideal storage facility looks like, and allowing you to store the ropes on the edges of the reel, the flanges, which is good practice, good housekeeping. You can see here, you can see the identification labels, test certificate. But the fork trucks, which are often, you don't want your fork truck forks making contact with the steel surface of the rope. To store them this way means a fork truck in there should not come into contact with the rope, leading to removing a risk of damage in storage.
And should they just sit there in situ, or should you do anything to sort of move them around, or, you know, what's...
When they're indoors like this, you can leave them in situ.
Yeah.
You know, you would have a sort of housekeeping system where you would know, because it's important, you know, it's all right having the rope stored perfect, but if the label's fallen off or is incorrect, that can lead to doubt and problems. And again, if you go to install a rope here urgently and the labelling is incorrect, you're not going to be able to install that rope till you discover which rope that is. So,
is there any need to rotate, for example?
Rotation is something that you would smaller size ropes, you rotate it every 3 months or beyond 90 degrees. But that would be for outdoor storage where temperature, the reason for rotating is to stop the migration of lubricant from top to bottom. Only possible with the smaller size ropes due to the cost of craneage on the large end. That would be cost prohibitive.
Right. Okay, so we've gone through good practice. Mm-hmm. Next slide. Common errors.
Yeah, well, you know, don't call it bad practice. as here we've called it common errors, and you know, people, as we said, not everybody's got ideal indoor storage capabilities. Here, pick up on a good point. They've placed them on concrete bollards to raise them off the floor to remove any risk of water. If there's any water, you can see here, this one's on the ground, potentially going to lead to problems with water or rain or whatever. The packaging's all broken away and loose. That should, even though that if a rope arrived in that state, you can still make some repairs to prevent, you know, you don't want these ropes exposed to wind-blown debris or anything of that nature. So yeah, and again, to highlight what we spoke of earlier, these ropes are stored on their side. You imagine what we talked about with the fork truck coming in there. There's every chance that the fork truck forks are going to come into contact with the rope, damage that rope, and you might not even spot that damage at time of installation, and then, you know, when you do spot it, it could be too late and the rope could be rejected.
Okay, so you've mentioned in there well, we've spoken before about people not having ideal conditions. Is there anything that you can do extra to help that?
Yeah,
position?
you know, I mean, many people don't have ideal conditions, and if you take anchor lines from a rig, sometimes you may have eight sets of 2,000 meters, 90 millimeter, for example. A lot of rope, impossible to store under cover. Ideally, you may consider. I mean, the packaging here is special packaging with a cost implication, but offset the cost versus the protection to the rope, and it would be considered as negligible, I guess, minimal. This would protect ropes from you know, sort of contact with not fork truck thing, but anything. There's a certain amount of padding. It protects the rope surface from UV rays from the sun, and it also insulates from the inside, and it promotes ventilation to avoid condensation. The image on the left, self-fabricated by a company, I think from memory this is a drill line, that can be left on the rig, getting a certain degree of protection from the elements, sun and rain, but again that would be suitable to store outside for a period of time.
And part of storage obviously is moving a wire rope.
Yeah.
Are there any sort of specific considerations when you move a wire rope?
Yeah, I mean these ropes are leaving the Neptune Key facility, very large piece weight ropes, obviously packed nicely for shipment. The outer cover giving the ultimate protection against the elements. There will be an additional internal packaging of polypropylene sheeting and perhaps even wood to give that extra protection. Yeah, during movement of these large ropes, it's very important to use a spreader beam to avoid any contact with the top of the flanges and inward forces that can damage that steel reel. You know, that can be dangerous in itself, making lifts. In the factories, we have the spreader beams in-house, but again, during discussions at inquiry stage, people should really talk about how they're going to offload these ropes. We always stress the need for a spreader beam, and also, you know, again, we should and we do speak with customers about the degree of packaging they want. These are actually designed with a skirt that once they get to their end destination, it can be dropped down, and it promotes ventilation underneath the shipping cradle. Okay.
Thank you very much for that, Al. Very informative. Hopefully we've covered everything you'd like to know about for wire rope storage. We've also got a bulletin that's up there on the screen to cover off any topics that we've missed out here. If you'd like to get in touch with either one of the application specialists at Bekaert, or alternatively would like a copy of the bulletin, please use the email address on screen. I hope that you found the session here informative and it's answered some of the questions that you might have. Otherwise, as I say, please reach out to us and we will try and answer your questions. Thank you very much for your time.